Hi, I'm Dr. Sherry Walling. I'm a clinical psychologist who focuses on the well being of entrepreneurs and high performers. One of the things that people are increasingly aware of is the importance of rest in the cycle of high performance. We know it from athletes. Athletes don't train every day. Even elite athletes don't train every day. They instead integrate a rhythm of rest and recovery into their training regimen so that they aren't overtaxing their muscles and making themselves vulnerable to injury. I think we are beginning to have a little bit of understanding of that in the entrepreneurial world. I will say that my perspective on burnout is that is a repetitive stress injury. That's an injury that is at least partially created by a failure to rest well and instead overuse certain neural circuitry to the point of exhaustion and fatigue, such that it breaks down, sort of like a muscle. I think most people understand the basic sort of science and neurochemistry behind an argument that you should make rest an important part of your entrepreneurial life. But the real challenge seems to come when people are like, okay, I'm willing to rest, I want to rest, but I don't know how to rest. And that is the subject of our conversation today, because rest is actually a little bit harder to come by than you think it's going to be. We seem to think of rest as non-activity. And when we go into this framing of non-activity, it's really easy for us to sort of drift into some default cultural assumptions about what is non-activity or restful, but is not actually restorative. And by non-activity, I mean generally sitting still and picking up this guy, that you are doing something on your phone, you're scrolling, you're checking Twitter, you're maybe just reading the news, playing a game, something that is mindless. So your mind isn't activated, so your mind is not working. Your mind is at rest. But is that truly restful? Does it really restore you? I am not anti-phone. I'm on social media like everybody else. I have solitaire on my phone, which I play sometimes. So I don't mean to advocate for this non-phone lifestyle, but I will say that scrolling through social media is not a form of rest. Like, it's not really something that restores or refills your coffers. It doesn't generate the kind of peace and perspective and restoration of your energy that we would optimally be looking for when we're looking for a rest and restoration practice. So instead of looking at the phone, some of my favorite ways to rest are, number one, to spend time in nature. And that is a sense of really moving out of our digital life, moving out of the things that take our attention, the kinds of screens, the light, the images that we're exposed to, moving deeply into the 3D world of texture, of breeze, of the sound of crunching leaves as you walk in the forest, really activating our sensory body, our sensory input by surrounding ourselves with the input of the natural world. So this is good for us in lots of ways. Of course, it shifts the neural circuitry that we're using when we are staring at a computer or recording YouTube, when we're doing the things in our digital life. So it's using a different part of our brain. We're letting one part rest and activating another part. It also deepens and enlivens us when we're using our sensory body. We are highly visual in our digital world, and so we aren't relying as much on our other senses, and so they can get a little bit atrophied or they get a little bored. We're not living in a sensory-rich life that really allows our brain to feed on the nourishment of all of the different kinds of input that are available to the brain. So when we get out in the forest, when we go for a walk around the lake, when we're on the beach, when we just decide to lay in the grass in our backyard, we're nourishing our brain in a really different way. And our brains just love that. It's like sort of a big exhale for our neurological systems. The other thing that it does is it isn't just an absence of activity, a non-action, a tuning out, but it is instead a tuning in, a deep focus, a deep listening, a deep presence with the 3D world in a way that is really restorative to our minds and to our hearts and to our energy. Making time in nature a rhythmic part of your life is an incredibly helpful way to build rest into your day. That can be walking the dog. It can be creating space to go for a jog with friends. It can be having a practice where you leave your work environment and go and spend, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 2 hours immersed in the natural world for time. Creating rhythms of rest, creating rhythms of time in nature is extraordinarily important to that rest. Creating rhythms of time in nature is extraordinarily important to your ability to restore the energy that you are pouring out when you are building your business or launching a product, working with your team, hiring folks, all the things that you do in the day-to-day life of your entrepreneurial journey. Another really wonderful way to rest that isn't the passive scrolling through Instagram is to engage your creative self. This is to be a maker. I'm really going to encourage those of you who do work on the internet or spend your time in front of a computer to get creative again in the 3D world, not in the digital world. So this can be baking a beautiful cake. It can be writing a piece of music. It can be learning to play an instrument, making pottery, getting your hands in something that you are making and creating. Again, big advantage using different circuitry in your brain than you use every day. But you also enter this sense of flow state where you're doing something, but it becomes non-effortful. The more you practice this creative skill, the more likely you are to be able to enter into that flow state, which, although is active, is a kind of rest because it's not as effortful or as activity driven as maybe other things that you do in your day-to-day work life. A third really, really wonderful way to rest is to sleep. I know that's an obvious one, but you would be surprised how many entrepreneurs in my world are not careful and protective about their sleep, and then they wonder why they're tired. They wonder why they are flirting with burnout. They wonder why they don't have the kind of patience and internal resources to stay as focused and as sharp as they would like to be able to stay throughout the day. So there is no way to shortchange the immense brain benefits that we get from sleep. So there is no shame in taking a nap or no shame in really prioritizing sleep as something that restores you. And this is one thing that I think is a way that we can get really disciplined about how we use our phones. Having our phones in our bedroom is probably quite problematic because it's just so easy to pick it up to check something, and then we're down the deep dive of conspiracy theories, and we have forgotten that we intended to go to bed 45 minutes ago. So the phone is a major distraction and disruptor of our discipline around sleep hygiene and sleep practices. So I highly recommend that people plug their phone in away from their bed so that there is some physical separateness and you have a place in your home, a place that is really carved out for rest, for pleasure. It's a place where you sleep, where you're making love, where you're cuddling with your partner, where you are engaged in these really lovely, juicy, restorative activities that are not easily disrupted or interrupted by the outer world via social media, email, phone calls, all of the things that can infiltrate us when we are on our phones. What are we doing when we're resting? We are taking a break. We are turning down the noise in our minds. We are re-regulating our nervous system. We are coming back to our factory settings, and we are trying to reverse some of the wear and tear that we all feel throughout the course of trying to do something difficult. When we are a high performer, when we're an entrepreneur, when we're an athlete, we're constantly pushing ourselves, pushing our bodies, pushing our minds, pushing our energy forward. And if we don't have practices that refill that energy that's expended, we will operate at a deficit. And over time, that deficit can get really scary. The deficit turns into burnout is the most likely one, but can also turn into things like depression, things like substance abuse, where we're using chemicals to regulate our sense of rest, right? Alcohol to calm us down, marijuana to sort of calm us down, help us sleep, and then caffeine to wake us back up again. And again, none of those things are terrible in moderation or in some isolation, but when we become dependent on them to regulate our energy instead of the more natural mechanism of actually just resting our bodies and minds, then we're trading something for this perception of being able to perform better, when in fact we're very unlikely to be able to perform well or at our max capacity when we are not resting well. So there's no better way to cope with stress or to cope with the challenges of a high intensity life than to build in rhythms where we are stepping away from, taking a break from, tuning into other parts of our life and letting ourselves really just luxuriate in not having the pressure of the outside world demanding something from us. Again, I pick a bit on the phone and social media because even if we're just passively scrolling, there's still a demand, there's still a request, there's still a requirement to think, to react, to like or to dislike, to hold information, to know something, rather than just to be in our individual unit as a human and feel our heart, hear the sounds around us, taste the food that's coming into our bodies, let our bodies really relax into sleep, to be just in this unit of one, because that is the unit that needs the rest. It's very, very difficult to have true restorative rest with a lot of external input from other people. Maybe the close intimacy of a cuddle with your partner or your child, that can be very restful. But when the demand is on us to react to the sort of en masse needs, challenges, feelings, ideas of the world, we're not in rest, we're in response. So diving into the unit of one, being in nature, being in body, being in play, being in flow, and just going to sleep. Those are my favorite strategies to rest well and really restore your energy as a high performer. Thanks so much for tuning in. Feel free to follow me on social media if you are interested in more strategies for rest, my favorite ways to rest. I am Dr. Walling on Instagram and Sherry Walling on Twitter. You can find me pretty easily on the internet, and it is my joy to provide you ideas and strategies to help make that high intensity life a little bit easier, a little more playful, a little bit more in balance. Thanks so much.